Amen, amen, amen. Hallelujah! I don't know about y'all. Y'all know, I'm not really yelling. I'm from Chicago. That's how we talk. But I'm so happy to be here with you. I want to give honor to my pastors who are in the house today. Pastor Todd, Pastor Mark, his lovely wife Brenda, who I know is wrangling your kids in the back somewhere, so she deserves some special prayers and honor. Glory to God. And I'm so happy to be here with you today. We are starting a new series. And you might think that it's coincidental, but we know that God does not work in coincidence. This is the month of May, and our series is called Be Well. And what we're going to be dealing with in this month is emotional healing. And so you know that's pretty dear to my heart, right? Well, if you know me, you know that. If you don't, now you do, right? And so the reason why I say you may think that it's coincidental is because May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so we got some, yes, and I want to thank Nakima for my visuals. She had to remind me that it was May, it was Mental Health Awareness Month. And I also just want to honor her and her team who do an amazing job with our social media. We are like lit on the map, seeing stuff, you know. And it's funny because she would always say, you all are doing so much, but nobody ever knows. And now they know because of Nakima and her team. You can fight me later, okay? Fight me later. But yeah, so today, is there another, did you show the other one too? Today, this month is Mental Health Awareness Month, and you'll see those on our social media, so I just stole them from her, so I'm sorry, I sure did, I stole them. So, today, I'm going to be talking to you from the title, Heal My Troubled Soul. And I know that that's a really dramatic title, and if you know me, you know I like drama, good drama though, not the bad drama that leads to other stuff. But that was really, I was struggling with that title, and I was like, oh, is it too much? And then I went to see Joyce Meyer on Friday, and she actually said those words, and I was like, there's confirmation, we're gonna keep that title. Heal my troubled soul, okay? And so, as we're gonna be talking about emotional healing in the Be Well series, but in order to talk about emotional healing, emotional wholeness, emotional wellness, we first have to talk about emotional hurt and distress, right? Because you cannot glorify one without addressing the other. What would happen is you just start sweeping stuff under the rug and talking about, oh, I'm emotionally whole and healed, but you really haven't dealt with your distress. Right? So I'm hoping that you'll take this ride with me. I know that God has a mighty word for us all. And some of it is probably going to be a little uncomfortable, but God is faithful in his word, okay? All right. So I want to orient us a bit, and I'm going to give us some definitions. So I want to define distress. Because I know oftentimes when we hear emotional distress, sometimes you might think court. You might think when somebody is suing for emotional distress. That's not really what we're talking about here today. Kind of, I guess it could lead to that. But distress is great pain, anxiety, or sorrow. It's acute physical or mental suffering. It's affliction. It's trouble. Another definition is a state of extreme need or requiring immediate assistance. I am in distress, I need help now. And some synonyms for distress are affliction, anxiety, sadness, sorrow, anguish, suffering, tribulation, and worry. So now we are beginning to be oriented about what we are actually talking about. And I think as we go further and further, you'll begin to see that everyone experiences distress at some point in your life. Nobody is exempt from experiencing some level of distress. So as we continue to orient ourselves, I wrote kind of a list of some stressful life events that can cause us, oh, thank you, that can lead to distress. Now, it's not an exhaustive list because there's so many things, right, that could lead to distress. But I thought I'd jot down a few things. So physical illness is one thing, especially if it's prolonged illness. If you have experienced any kind of illness for a long time, you know that eventually you can become distressed about it. And what else? Family discord, financial strain, debt, abuse of any kind, neglect, abandonment, rejection, regret, grief and loss, unfulfilled desires. You had a plan for your life. It has not yet unfolded. That can cause you some distress. Bullying. Being adults get bullied too. Bullying, being a social outcast or being socially isolated, and even positive stressors. Positive life stressors can cause us distress. And I'm talking about things like being married, getting married, starting a new job, having a baby, buying a house. All of these things, even though they are good, they can still cause some distress because it's a change in our status quo. So when emotional distress is not managed well and not managed in a timely manner, it can trigger mental health issues. And I'm talking about things such as anxiety, depression, PTSD, bipolar disorder, all those kinds of things that can occur when stress or multiple stressors are put upon us and we don't manage them, okay? And so in fact, what we know is that depression and anxiety are the two most common disorders, not just in the United States, but in the world. So this is not a local problem in the United States. This is an international issue. Okay? But my goal here today is not to come and lecture you on psychopathology. I could, but I won't. That's not what we're here to do today. But I do want to just highlight the fact that emotional distress is very much connected to mental health issues, okay? Because it's Mental Health Awareness Month and we should be aware. Emotional hurt and stress, when it is not dealt with, can actually lead to those types of things, okay? So now, as we are still orienting ourselves, we are still in the introduction, I want to set some ground rules. And if you don't like what I have to say, you can catch me outside. You catch Jesus outside. That's who you catch the Holy Spirit outside. And when I say ground rules, what I'm saying is what we're not going to do, okay? So one thing we're not going to do is we're not going to judge people for experiencing distress. We are not going to come and be judgmental for people who are feeling hopeless, for people who are feeling maybe a little helpless, people who are feeling depressed or anxious or even suicidal. We're not going to walk around with judgment in our heart or on our lips for people. I've heard this thing, well, if you're feeling that type of way, if you're experiencing that, then maybe you're not a Christian. Or maybe, your faith is just not strong enough. The devil is a liar. That's right. So we're not going to do that. And we're also not going to judge ourselves if we are in seasons where we're feeling emotional distress. We're going to cut ourselves some slack. We're going to show ourselves some grace, the same grace that God shows us daily. We're going to do that, okay? So that's one thing that we're not going to do. The next thing we're not going to do is we're not going to discourage people from seeking godly counsel. We're not going to discourage people from seeking therapy, from talking to their pastors, from maybe even having to get some medication or having to go to rehab. And let me tell you something, you have no idea what people are enduring. You have no idea what they need to help them feel better. So your ideas about medication or therapy, you know what, they really don't matter if you're not a lifeline for somebody else. And so we're not going to try and discourage people from doing what they need to do. Because just like many of you were called to your jobs, we're called to our jobs too. Any mental health professionals in the building? Come on, stand up. Holla at your girl. Holla at your girl. Restorers, repairers of the breach. And so if it's not for you, okay. But don't discourage people from doing what they need to do to get healthy. I'm gonna give you just a little bit of story. So when I was in graduate school, I had this idea about medication. I feel like kids were over-medicated all the time, and they were over-diagnosed, especially with attention deficit disorder. And I'm not for that. Real righteous. And I ended up doing an internship at the University of Chicago in their neuropsych department. And what I did there was I tested kids and adolescents for things like learning disabilities or attention deficit disorders or even autism spectrum disorders. So I run across this 5-year-old, Jesus, and I am testing him. And with the younger kids, we would split it up into 2 days. With the older kids, you could take the whole day and just take a break. But I met this young man, this little Mexican boy, and the whole time we sit at this desk, I sit on one side, he sits on one side, I got all my supplies, and this little boy moved his legs and feet the entire time. He could not shut it down. He could not shut it off. He was in such distress to the point where he got up and started running around the room, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm just a trainee. I don't know what to do. And the little boy was in such distress that he ran and just hid under the table. And who had to go and get him from under the table? Me. I had to go up under that table and coax this young man out of there. And I believe that the Lord allowed me to have that experience to say, you know what? You don't know what people need. And that turned the corner for me. I said, listen, this boy needs something to help him take the edge off. His family needs something to help them. And then once he takes the edge off, then you can bring in the therapist to kind of help him with some other tools. So that's just me saying, we don't have a right to judge or to try to discourage people, right? So there's one more thing, and then we're going to move on. So the last thing is we're not going to manipulate people. It's quiet again. We are not going to manipulate people. And what I mean by that is we're not going to use their struggles against them. We are not going to blame our problems on their emotional distress. You don't get to say that this thing is broken because you have depression. The devil is a liar. We have to own our own stuff. And in the same way, if you are dealing with emotional distress, you don't get to use that to manipulate somebody else. Well, you have to do this for me because I'm broken. No. That is not how it works. And I need you to understand that manipulation, well, that's deception. And deception is of the devil. So we got to cut it out. So now that we have been sufficiently snatched, our edges have been snatched, we're going to have Bunny check all our edges afterwards to see if we still got them. Now we're going to get into this word, okay? So we got our ground rules. But before we do, I want to say, I wrote this down, at the bottom line is, and I really need to say this, I really feel like the Lord wants us to understand that some of the strongest people are those who, despite their emotional distress, they still get up every day and they get stuff done. You know what I'm saying? Now, although it's difficult for them, sometimes they're more functional than us so-called healthy people. So they are to be encouraged, to be supported, to be prayed for. They are not to be judged. They are not to be managed. And they're certainly not to be manipulated. And so, again, if you're not praying and encouraging us in our faith as we're walking through seasons of distress, then just shut it. Sorry, not sorry. There you go. And I'm not mad at you. I'm just very passionate about this, and I've seen it from all of these different sides. And if you know better, you do better, right? Because the same grace that is on your life is the same grace that other people need and deserve. And I'm not telling you to enable someone who has issues. I'm not telling you to give a drug addict money. I'm not telling you to do things that you know are not right, but I am saying you got to cover them with grace. It's something that's been floating around social media, and I believe our pastor sent it to us that, when you see people who are struggling, our first response is often, what's wrong with them? And that is a question of judgment, right? But what we really should be asking ourselves is, what's their story? What happened? Because then we're coming from a place of compassion. That's the kind of question that God appreciates, that God is pleased with. Because once you know their story, then it's more difficult to judge their behavior. It doesn't mean you don't correct their behavior, but you correct it from a place of love and compassion. And of course, if you have equity in their life, right? You can't just go around correcting everybody. But anyway, so in Mark 2:17, Jesus says to the people, healthy people don't need a doctor, sick people do. And so if Jesus is the doctor, then the church is the hospital. And we are walking around here, all nurses and support staff. So let's all act accordingly, okay? All right? Okay. Praise God. So, again, our edges have been snatched. And now we're going to get into this word. I want to take us to King David. We know him as a psalmist. We know him as one of the greatest kings that ever lived. We know him as a man after God's own heart, right? And yet, he was a man who was rejected, who was abandoned, who was betrayed, who experienced deep sorrow and anxiety. And he wrote very candidly and very often about his experience. And so this is a time where I want to give you some tools, some useful tools that you can add to your toolkit. This is the time to encourage you in your faith and to remind you that there's nothing new under the sun and you are not alone. Okay? So, and if it's not you, then maybe it's someone in your life and you can be praying for them and maybe encouraging them in the way that I am encouraging you. Okay? So, we're going to start in Psalms 31. I'm going to give you quite a bit of scripture, but we're going to go through pretty quickly, so don't panic, okay? We'll give you quite a bit of scripture because I need you to see how King David managed distress, how he came out, and how he moved toward emotional wholeness and healing, okay? So, Psalms 31, starting at verse 9, he says, "Have mercy on me, O Lord, for I am in distress." Well, there you go. Y'all can come up, we can go home. No, I'm just kidding. It's right there, right? Tears blur my eyes, my body and soul are withering away. I am dying from grief. My years are shortened by sadness. Sin has drained my strength. I am wasting away from within. This is in the Bible. 11 says, I am scorned by all my enemies and despised by my neighbors. Even my friends are afraid to come near me. So David is experiencing some abandonment, right? So he's feeling useless. He's feeling alone. And he goes on to say, when they see me on the street, they run the other way. 12 says, I am ignored as if I were dead, as if I were a broken pot. He's feeling invisible. That's a horrible feeling. I have heard the many rumors about me, and I am surrounded by terror. My enemies conspire against me, plotting to take my life. There's fear and there's despair. But then he changes his focus. Something happens because he remembers the sovereignty and the power of the living God. And he goes on to say, but I am trusting you, O Lord, saying, you are my God. My future is in your hands. Rescue me from those who hunt me down relentlessly. Let your favor shine on your servant. In your unfailing love, rescue me. He acknowledges God's unfailing love. Don't let me be disgraced, O Lord, for I call out to you for help. Let the wicked be disgraced. Let them lie silent in the grave. In other words, you can take them out. Now, we do not ask the Lord to take folks out. We are under grace. We don't do it. But he did, a lot. He was always like, you can just go ahead and kill them, because I'm done. I'm over it, I'm done. And then 18 says, silence their lips, those proud and arrogant lips that accuse the godly. Then he goes from acknowledging God's sovereignty into praise. He says at 19, how great is the goodness you have stored up for those who fear you. You lavish it on those who come to you for protection, blessing them before the watching world. You hide them in the shelter of your presence, safe from those who conspire against them. You shelter them in your presence. He is remembering the things that God has done for him, far from accusing tongues. Praise the Lord. For he has shown me the wonders of his unfailing love. He kept me safe when my city was under attack. He's remembering. He even said, I panicked. In a panic, I cried out. I am cut off from the Lord. But you heard my cry for mercy. Thank you, Jesus. And you answered my call for help. 23 says, love the Lord, all you godly ones, for the Lord protects those who are loyal to him. But he harshly punishes the arrogant. Lord, have mercy. So be strong and courageous, all who put your hope in the Lord. So he goes from distress and despair to remembering God's power and his sovereignty, to praise, and then to encouragement. I want to take you to another one. There's several in the Psalms where you see him just having a problem. He's not doing well. But there's always a pattern that David uses. And so, I always have to present you all with the evidence from the scriptures, right? So let's go now to Psalms 13. Let's go to 13, and we're going to start at verse 1. And he says right here, "O Lord, how long?" How many of you have ever said that to God? When will it be over? Is pretty much what he's saying. How long will you forget me? Forever? That's King David. How long will you look the other way? He's feeling hopeless right about now. How long must I struggle with anguish in my soul, with sorrow in my heart every day? How long will my enemy have the upper hand? Turn and answer me, O Lord my God. Now he got a little stout because he's over it. Then he says, restore the sparkle to my eyes, or I will die. Don't let my enemies gloat, saying, we have defeated him. Don't let them rejoice at my downfall. Don't let me be ashamed, oh God. Don't let me be put to shame. And then something turns. And he says, but I trust in your unfailing love. I will rejoice because you have rescued me. I will sing to the Lord. Why? Because he is good to me. I'm going to give you one more just for good measure. Psalms 142. We're going to start at verse 1. Here we go again. I cried out to the Lord. I plead for the Lord's mercy. This is probably, I love this particular verse. 142 verse 2. I poured out my complaints before him and tell him all my troubles. When I am overwhelmed, you alone know the way I should turn. Wherever I go, my enemies have set traps for me. I look for someone to come and help me, but no one gives me a passing thought. He's feeling pretty sorry for himself. No one will help me. No one cares a bit what happens to me. And oftentimes when people are in distress, when people are feeling depressed or feeling anxious, we feel like we are by ourselves. There is nobody in the world who understands what I must be going through. It's just me. I'm strange and I'm alone. And then in verse 5 he says, then I pray to you, O Lord. I say, you are my place of refuge. You are all I really want in life. And he goes back. He says, hear my cry, for I am very low. Sometimes you go in and out of that thing, right? And then he comes back. So he's got some deep sorrow, some isolation, some fear. He comes back. He says, rescue me from my persecutors, for they are too strong for me. He ain't back yet. Comes back in verse 7. Bring me out of prison so I can thank you. The godly will crowd around me. And he says it again. For you are good to me. Despite all that I am enduring, you, Lord, are good to me. So, what can we learn from King David's transparency in these scriptures? What can we learn from his crying out? How can we learn to overcome seasons of distress and move toward the process of emotional healing? I like to title this section, What Would David Do? Now, when I come back to you in about 3 weeks, we're going to talk about what would Jesus do? So this is part 1, and that'll be part 2. And in the middle of that, you're going to get some good preaching on this series, okay? And what would Jesus do? We always want to bring you back to the Christology of things, right? To Christ. But what would David do? So the first thing we want to say, David would look up. And what do I mean by that? I mean seek God's face. So we need to focus, and what we see from him is when we begin to focus more on God's goodness than our problems, then we can get what's laid up for us, that comfort, that reassurance, that hope, that strength, right? If we can focus on God and all that he has done, if we can remember that he's done it before and he will do it again, then we can get all of those things that are stored up for us. So, for instance, Psalms 105:4 says, search for the Lord and for his strength. Continually seek him. Look up. Psalms 9 and 10 says, and those who know your name will put their trust in you, for you, Lord, have not forsaken those who seek you. Psalms 34:4 says, I sought the Lord and he heard me and delivered me from all my fears. Psalms 119:2 says, blessed are those who keep his statutes and seek him with all their heart. It's right there in the scriptures. The first thing we need to do is look up. Seek the Lord in our problems. I want to give you the example of Hannah. You may remember her from 1 Samuel chapter 1 and 2. Hannah is the wife of Elkanah. She is the mother of Samuel, one of our great prophets in the scriptures. And Hannah walked around very distraught because Hannah she was barren and she had not had any children. And then to add insult to injury, her sister wife would always tease her because she was having all these babies. And there's something real weird about polygamy, but that is what it was back then. So she had this other wife, and she was having all these kids, and she was like, look at you, what you doing? Not this, And she would just make her feel really bad because you know that back in those days that having children was a status symbol. And Hannah did not have children. But yet, Elkanah favored Hannah. As a matter of fact, her name means favor. But what Hannah did, and the point that I'm trying to get is that instead of, going back at her sister wife or just, giving up, Hannah pressed through. She was determined to pray and seek the Lord even though she was in pain, and the Lord blessed her. And we don't have time to really go into it, but I encourage you to read 1 Samuel 1 and 2 to really get a sense of Hannah. Hannah is a beautiful character in the scriptures. She's a character that gives us hope. So the first thing we want to do is look up, what would David do? The second thing we want to do is think up. So let me explain. Now remember, I'm a singer first, right? So when I was in college, and we would be, singing in the choral, our chorus, singing in the chorus, or we would have like little trios or whatever. So every once in a while, your pitch would fall. And our vocal director would always tell us, think up. Because if you think up, then you can bring yourself back to your pitch center. You bring yourself back to your pitch center. In other words, you won't be flat anymore. You'll be singing in the right key. Think up. And I'm like, you're crazy, but I tried it and it works. If you think up, it is all about perception. Right? So, one of the things we need to do is we got to think about what we're thinking about. Because listen, we know Satan's trick. We know that the battlefield is the mind. We know that if he can get your mind, if he can get you to believe all those negative things about yourself, then he's won. And the fight is literally with your thoughts. So we have to think, not here, not what he's trying to tell us. We have to think up. Think about what you're thinking about, right? You cannot. And if you spend any time with me, and you told me about your issues, you probably heard me say, you cannot accept every thought that just pops into your mind. You have to think about, and you have to ask the question, is this the mind of Christ? Is this something that my Heavenly Father would say about me? Is he telling me that I'm worthless? Because if it's not him, then who is it? Is he telling me that I cannot do it, that I will never be this, that I am too much of that? Is this the mind of Christ? Because if it is not the mind of Christ, then what you need to do is cast it down. You do not have to accept everything that runs across your mind. It is a trick of the enemy. You got to hear me when I say it. I'm going to be anxious for the rest of my life. Well, am I? What does God say about me? He says I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. He says I'm more than a conqueror. He says I am the head and not the tail if I follow his commands. We always forget that part. And we walk around, I am the head and not the tail. Are you? I'm sorry, that's so funny to me. Okay, let's get back on task. Cannot accept every thought. You have to examine your thoughts. And this is why renewing your mind is so important. The continual renewing of your mind. And I said it already, that perspective is important. Because how you see yourself is how you will walk through the world. And how you walk through the world is how other people will perceive you. And so I want to take you to an example from Joshua 13. You might already know the story, right? I'm talking about when Moses sent out the 12 scouts. Now they're right at the cusp of the promise. And he says, go over, see what's over there. Is the land good? I mean, he already knew, but go and see, bring us back a report. So Caleb and his homie Joshua, they go over and they come back and they like, dude, it's lit. It's got everything we need and we can surely take it. We got this. Then you had the other 10 dudes. Well, it's giants over there. And their walls are really fortified and they are stronger than us and it is really scary. And when we look at them, we feel like grasshoppers and we know that's what we look like to them. And do you know that those 10, they infected the whole group? So my question to you becomes, who do you want to be? What's your perspective? Will you see yourself as God sees you? Or will you see yourself as Satan sees you? I'm just saying. I know that's weighty, right? But here's something that's even more weighty. Either you believe what God says about you, or you call him a liar.
Amen.
Either you believe every word of that book, what he says about you, that you are priceless and precious and fearfully and wonderfully made, even when you don't see it, even when you don't feel like it. Either you believe him or you call him a liar. So we want to look up and we want to think up, and the next thing we want to do is get up. Get up. What I mean by that is we got to get in God's presence. There are so many benefits to the presence of God. Did you see that in David's? When I was reading those Psalms, David eventually would get up and be like, you know what, let me extol the goodness of the Lord. We need to get in his presence. What are the benefits? Protection. Genesis 28:15, I am with you and I will protect you wherever you go because I am with you. You are in my presence. What else? Comfort. No, comfort. Psalms 23:4. Even though I walked through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Why? Because you are with me. I am in your presence. And what about rest? Exodus 33:14. My presence will go with you and I will give you rest. I'm going to give you some more. What about joy? Psalm 16:11. In your presence there is fullness of joy. Right? How though do we get into God's presence? Look at David. What would David do? David would praise. We get into the presence of God through our praise and our worship. And it's not just what we do on Sunday. It's not just what we do being led by a group of people. It is what we do every day. It's what we do as we walk through our life. It's the choices that we make. Do they glorify God? That is my praise and my worship to him. It's not just the songs that I sing. It's the life that I live. And he promises, I will inhabit the praises of my people. Get in his presence. Get up. Don't stay down in the pit. Woe is me. I'm so sorry. You know what? And I'm not trying to negate your feeling of lowness. I am not trying to negate your deep sorrow. But I'm saying the only way you're going to get up is if you get up. And all of those benefits are great. But really, the real reward of our praise and worship is God himself. And as I said before, he promises to inhabit the praises of his people. That is the reward. And the rest of that is the benefit. Get up. And then finally, you got to speak up. Right? I love you, birdies. Psalms 34 says, and 17, it says, the righteous cry out, and the Lord hears them. He delivers them from all their troubles. Psalms 145 and 18 says, the Lord is close to all who call on him. Yes, to all who call on him in truth. And this is not just something you say in your head, because sometimes things don't happen until you make a sound. You have to call on the name of Jesus. So when you're going through a struggle, maybe instead of that curse word, me too, I'm just keeping it real. Instead of the curse word, maybe we need to say Jesus. Instead of looking at our issues and our problems and thinking that we can't get out, maybe we should just invoke the name of Jesus. Maybe we should just call him when things get too hard and we don't have any words, and maybe we can't even pray. But what we do have is the name of Jesus. Because what? There is healing in the name of Jesus. There is deliverance in the name of Jesus. Demons broken. Yes. Because when we speak out, when we call out to him, we acknowledge, and you guys can come off, you all can come up, I'm done, I'm getting there. We acknowledge that without him, we are nothing. We acknowledge that we cannot do it in our own strength, that our power is no match to his. So we call the name of Jesus because we realize that without him we are utterly helpless. And so we look up, we think up, we get up, and we speak up. If we follow David's example, even when he poured out his complaints, because you do have a right to do that. If you're in a relationship with someone, you got a right to tell them, I don't like how this is going, they're bothering me, get them up off me, what are we doing here? David shows us, you can pour out your complaint, but you cannot stop there. Once you have poured out your complaint, the next thing you got to do is pour out your praise. That's where you end it. That's where you end it. And just like he said several times, y'all can come on. These are my friends. You end it with your praise and you say, Lord, you've been good to me. Now you know we can't leave you. You know we're going to open up this altar. And I know that for some of you this might be a struggle. But we always want to pray for you wherever you are.